Good morning, good evening, and welcome to the day 2 of the 46th meeting of the National Academy's Nuclear and Radiation Studies Board in day 2's open session. As with yesterday's open session, the main purpose is to inform the board and staff about topics that might be further developed into National Academy's projects. Thus, the discussion is for the board and staff. We will record the session and endeavor to post it in the coming week. Today's topic is proposing a simple radiation scale for the public, Radiation Index, RAIN. The main panelist is Gyu-Sung Cho of Korea, of the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST. And after his presentation, Dan Fenstermacher will spend 5 minutes discussing his related concept. Then board member Paul Dickman will lead the discussion as moderator. Paul, over to you.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank our Korean colleagues for staying up so late and participating in this meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Cho. If you would go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and Paul Dickman. Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Gyu-Sung Cho. By the way, it is raining a little in Korea. I'm a professor in the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering of KAIST. And it is my great honor to present this proposal at this meeting. And I would like to emphasize that this proposal is not a result of any scientific research. And also it's not solely the result of my own effort, but rather is the outcome of extensive discussions and collaborations with my colleagues over the past few years. And they are written here, and Professor Jong-Hyun Kim is attending. Thank you, Kim. And I'll start. So first, I will introduce the motivation behind this study. And next, I'll present how the RAIN formula was made, followed by a public survey result. And finally, I'll conclude the presentation by summarizing key points and raising some issues for further future consideration. As you all know, as a radiation expert, radiation has both benefits and harms. Non-ionizing radiation, such as sunlight, is truly essential to all forms of life on Earth. Even ionizing radiation is extremely useful in many fields of human activity, industry, food and agriculture, environmental protection, and science research at all. And also, I'd like to emphasize the radiation plays a critical role in medicine. The only concern is potential health risk. Radiation exposure can lead to cancer, genetic mutations, and tissue damage. But what actually matters is the amount of exposure. However, the general public appears to have a fear of radiation, commonly referred to as radiophobia. It is defined as irrational, excessive, and unnecessary fear of radiation. In most cases, it's greatly exaggerated compared to the actual risk. There are believed to be several reasons for radiophobia. First, radiation itself is invisible and undetectable by human sense. Also, the background radiation is ubiquitous. These results induce unfounded fear like a ghost. Second, mass media has a natural tendency to sensationalize the accidents, especially Chernobyl and Fukushima nuclear power plant accidents. It's demonizing radiation to the public. And third, the public has little experience with radiation in their daily life and has no opportunity to learn about radiation. But more importantly, or most importantly, the jargon used in radiation science may have contributed to the public radiophobia. Jargon of radiation include specialized terms like alpha, beta, gamma, isotope, cross-section, etc. And in addition, the use of numerous new units like Becquerel, Curie, Sievert, Gray, and also variety of prefixes like a kilo, mega, milli, micro. Those are very unfamiliar to the public. And also conversion between these units, for example, between activity and the equivalent dose, is not a trivial problem. It's quite complicated. So even highly educated scientists and well-trained engineers, if they do not have a background in radiation science, they often find the terminology challenging and unfamiliar. For example, most scientists and engineers, they know about the Joule, DNA, but they are unfamiliar with the attenuation coefficient or macroscopic cross-sections. And nuclear physicists or engineers, they may understand the sigma or attenuation coefficient, but many of them do not fully understand the actual health effect of 100 millisievert or how it differs from 100 milligray. Thus, the jargon in radiation science not only contributes to the radiophobia, but also it acts as a significant barrier to effective communication between all sort of people and experts. So that's why we proposed this simple concept. Following 2011 Fukushima MPP accidents, many wrong decisions were made in Japan and Korea and around the world due to the public radiophobia and misinformation and disinformation. So over the time in Korea, in KAIST, we discussed how to mitigate this situation. And we finally realized that it is impossible to teach or educate every member of the public. So we have to reconsider how such information should be communicated. Our sincere goal is to help ease the public fear of the radiation by providing a simple communication tool, RAIN. Now, I'll tell you the strategic guidelines before we making the RAIN formula. The new concept should serve as a simple alternative to complex scientific jargon in everyday conversation. And it should be easy to remember. So radiation index is easy enough, but maybe RAIN is more funny and easy to remember. So just as the Richter scale quantifies the magnitude of an earthquake, RAIN should reflect the impact or health risk of a certain radiological event on members of the public. Thus, it should be intuitively understood without background in science, but it should be measurable and calculable scientifically. And second, the technical guidelines. We want to use the total accumulated effective dose from a certain event, the total dose. We also want to use the ratio of total dose to the reference baseline dose of 0.01 millisievert. This is IAEA approved exemption and clearance level. And surely the dimensionless and logarithmic format is useful. Similarly, like a Richter scale or decibel for sound or pH for acidity. So RAIN value ranges from 0 to about 10. And generally, we allow only one decimal place. So rain has a precisely one-to-one correspondence with the scientific unit. It must have. So effectively complementing the scientific unit. So the definition is given like this equation. But it is a little modification of our first version. But anyway, 0.1 millisievert converts into the rain value of 1, and 1 millisievert goes to 2. So if you look at this table, it is really simple. And this red line is the 2017 version. And we added 1 to prevent the rain function becoming from becoming negative values. So 2017, the first scientific paper was peer-reviewed paper was published. At that time, the rain has 2 regions. And the lowest region is forced to be 0. But now, by putting 1 in the formula, it's becoming more smooth and the single functions. And in this table, you see some examples of the health effect or some cases of like event. And let me show you several. One is the world's annual average natural dose. Actually, if there's no special event of radiological event, then people will get 2.4 millisievert per year. It corresponds to 2.4 rain value. And threshold for additional cancer risk from Hiroshima atomic bomb survivors is believed to be around 100 millisievert, equivalent to 4.0. And threshold of some hematopoietic syndrome is around 500 millisievert, 4.7 rain value. And the mortality threshold is 3,000 millisievert, equivalent to 5.5. So based on these 4 criteria, we classified the whole range into 5 zones: serene, breeze, vigilance, alarm, and serious. Then 2023 in Korea, we surveyed 1,000 Koreans, 740 general public, 70 medical doctors, about 300 nuclear engineers, mostly professors and students. We asked 3 questions. The first one is how familiar are you with the millisievert? And as you see, the general public, 90% of them never heard of it or unfamiliar. Even radiologists, 24%, 1/4 of them said never heard of it or unfamiliar. Second question is, among Richter scale 5.0 or 1 billion joule, 1 ton of TNT, which one is more easy for you to understand the magnitude of earthquake? Everybody said Richter scale because they heard enough in mass media for their whole life. So our final question is, what do you think if we change the millisievert into some rain value, like a magnitude of earthquake? And in all 3 groups, more than 80% said it will be very helpful. So I'll summarize. Our final equation we submit is this equation, and we propose 5 zones with the color code. Now, we invite any constructive suggestion to improve and to publicize this. For example, it's appropriate to divide into 5 zones. Why not 4 zones? 4 zones is more commonly used in general situation. And also maybe 3 is even simpler. And the name of 5 zones maybe not educate. Color seems okay, but some people may not, they don't agree. And the zone boundary was set by four categories, four standards, which are very complicated numbers, too difficult. So if we change simply like a 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of these one decimal numbers, then it is more easy to remember. So we thought about this scale of radiological event, similarly to the INES, International Nuclear Event Scale. That's a 7 scales actually. Anyway, in 2019, we went to Paris and attended OECD NEA and we presented. And we got 2 recommendations. One is this: get consensus from experts and international communities. So I truly appreciate inviting us. Recently in our group, we talked about how about the proposal to IAEA to make an official tech document. And the second recommendation from OECD NEA is publicized to the general public more widely. Now the question is which body or who would finance it for this activity. Anyway, our humble and sole aim is to make a better communication with the public and all sort of engineers and scientists with this simple word. Thank you for inviting us. 16 minutes. 17.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're
So
welcome.
now do we want to let Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, are you ready to talk about your idea?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Oh,
probably there.
but the podium might be better.
Oh, podium. Yeah. go
Okay,
ahead.
let's do, yeah, that camera on the podium, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you. You can hear me from here? Good.
Yes.
Well, thank you to the committee and the chair for allowing me to make some comments. I was actually thrilled to see Dr. Cho's paper on the agenda. I applaud its motivation and I fully support the need for discussion on this very topic. My PhD is in physics, but I have 30 years in the government in the policy realm. So my perspective comes from there, and I retired in 2023 after having helped negotiate several nuclear security agreements with Russia, minimize HEU around the globe, and other things. Our office, however, also addressed the Fukushima and its aftermath, including the wastewater release, the ALPS program, Russian troops traversing Chernobyl in the invasion in 2022, and various radiation incidents. As such, I saw countless papers, analyses, and intel involving radiation risk and came to a stark conclusion, the same one that Dr. Cho's come to, and that is that none of the radiation numbers were ever comprehensible to policymakers who weren't scientists. None of them. A close friend of mine was recently diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and he also asked me for a layman's perspective on the option of total body irradiation if that was part of a treatment option that he would select. So today's topic remains very close to my heart. I actually gave a presentation myself on a dimensionless radiation unit that I'd been thinking about for several years. And this was to the NRSB's meeting in 2016 on adopting SI units for radiation in the United States during the public discussion period. So some of these may be familiar if some of you were actually at that meeting, 2016. Can I have the first slide, please? I call the unit RAD risk based on, as Dr. Cho did, an analogy to the radiation Richter scale. Now, until 2016, I'd only shared the concept informally with a few radiation experts at PNNL, Union of Concerned Scientists, and a few other colleagues. But on March 3rd, 2020, I presented it officially to the G7 Nuclear Safety and Security Group at State, where it was very well received, I can report. Unfortunately, it went immediately to the back burner because of the COVID shutdowns that were imminent. So I was thrilled to find the Korean paper being presented during this meeting describing almost the identical concept, a normalized radiation unit based on a logarithmic scale related to average background that was proposed for exactly the same reasons as my presentations. Dr. Cho's paper indeed mentions the analogy with the Richter scale and also decibels of sound, examples the public generally understands, exactly as I did. So we were thinking precisely along the same lines. So I'm very grateful to be able to comment on the paper and maybe add a little value to it. Dr. Cho's paper, however, chooses a normalization that I believe results in a not very intuitive unit and could be vastly improved by simply choosing a different denominator. Our two normalizing factors seem to be the same, 10 microsieverts. But mine is 10 microsieverts per day, a rate. And that's an estimated background rate. It's equivalent to 3.65 millisieverts a year, very close to the CDC's estimate for the background in the United States, and just slightly higher than Dr. Cho's selected value of 2.4 millisieverts per year. On the RAD-RISC scale, the background dose rate is thus log of 1 or 0. So already an inherently intuitive number conveying zero risk other than being an earthling. And environments with 100 times background are RAD-RISC 2. So this scale happens to max out, like the Richter scale level, at about RAD-RISC 9. And that's comparable to standing right next to spent fuel, freshly discharged from a nuclear reactor without shielding. You'd never do it. But that's sort of the most intense radiation environment on Earth that we could produce. Next slide, please. So Dr. Cho's normalizing amount in the denominator is simply 10 microsieverts, a dose, not a dose per day. His paper then gives examples such as a year's worth of background dose, noting the extremely coincidental, I think actually confusing, result that the RAIN metric log of 2.4 millisieverts over 10 microsieverts happens to be 2.38, which rounds to 2.4, which is the same number as the chosen background yearly dose. 100 years of background in his scale is 4.4. I just don't think numbers like 2.4 and 4.4 actually convey any intrinsic feeling to the riskiness of the radiation involved. On the other hand, I noticed in yesterday's presentations, 240 millisieverts was around the midpoint of Dr. Richardson's and Dr. Hauptmann's graphs on the x-axis on the long-term studies of low-dose radiation. Is 4.4 a helpful number to put along that x-axis for the public to help them understand how much it is? Or would 100 years of background, an extra 100 years, because we live to about 85, would that be the more helpful intuitive unit to help label those x-axes? Next slide, please. In other words, RAIN, in my mind, seems to completely miss the intrinsic appeal and familiarity of the Richter scale, although it tries to go there. And it makes the RAD-RISC idea actually much more relatable, I believe, for dose rates. It turns out also coincidentally that maybe not coincidentally, that the 9 orders of magnitude in the Richter scale are also very close, similar to the 9 orders for sound, as expressed in decibels, and roughly 9 orders of brightness from the faintest starlight to staring at the sun. As a corollary, I don't think we need to convert doses such as 10 days worth of background to the RAIN value of 0.8. Again, the 0.8 doesn't do anything for me. 10 days of background, to me, is an already intuitive level of dose. And I think any patient would, if you're told by a doctor you need 10 extra days of background to see if you have broken ribs, would say that's a reasonable risk, just 10 extra days. Tweaking the denominator to 10 microsieverts per day results in the RAD-RISC scale clearing up a lot of this confusion. I would also say that branding is key in the digital age, and I would strongly advise against choosing an acronym such as RAIN, because I don't think we want the public picturing radiation as raining down on us or coming out in a storm. I'd rather think of those heroic first responders at Fukushima experiencing radiation environments of rad risk 4 or 5, serious but workable, such as earthquakes, and thus only being allowed a limited number of shifts before they got a few tens of years of background. Closer to the damaged core, of course, where the rad risk level was probably 8 or more, only robotic equipment could be used. So I would like to propose, working with the authors and perhaps the committee if there's interest, to use Dr. Cho's excellent research, examples, context, and purpose, which with I agree 100%, but redo the normalization to a scale that becomes inherently intuitive in the dimensionless unit rad risk based on dose rates, that is the risk of a given radiation environment, rather than RAIN for the log of the dose itself. Complementing the rad risk scale, of course, doses for public communication should simply be expressed as equivalent extra days, weeks, or years of background, an understandable thing when we live 85 years in background anyway. So in the last slide, I have some examples that I added in red to what was called the CDC's website, the radiation thermometer. So these are all equivalent days. And it's interesting to see that LD50 is approximately 1,000 years of background in an acute dose. That kind of makes sense. 1,000 years of background like that, LD50. So in conclusion, I believe that wide adoption of the normalized dimensionless unit rad risk for radiation environments, and then equivalent days, weeks, or years of background for radiation dose, has the potential to really resonate with the public, the press, policymakers, and recast the understanding of radiation risk in a completely appropriate and intuitive way. And it basically just involves a tweak to the denominator in Dr. Cho's otherwise excellent paper. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you. All right, so we have some, so now it's the opportunity for discussion. I'm going to start off with Mansung. You have your first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Professor Cho, Professor Kim, for the presentation. Although I was a colleague of them, I didn't have a chance to comment on this thing. Anyway, I finally have a chance to at least make some comments. This is a great idea, and then I think our presenter also gave us a very good perspective on this proposed idea. But I think this is a thing that we need to pursue, I believe. But there are several refinements as we heard from our second presenter. Some issues needs to be addressed, along with the concept of idea of how do we address the regulatory limits, because currently regulatory bodies use this in this country 50 millisievert as a limit, occupational limit. Where does this number belong here? So if our NRC says 50 millisievert or whatever is the safe or non-safe level, according to this RAD scale or RAIN, what does that mean? I think we have to be a little mindful about the current existing regulatory requirements in setting numbers like this, as so that there is no confusion from the public's point of view. Government says this, but then rad risk or RAIN says something else. So I think we should have some sort of a consensus or compromise, agreeing with those things. And I completely agree with our second presenter's opinion that we heard yesterday and along the way. Those rate effects are very relevant, important. And I think currently we have a lot of research going on this board. I think discussion on RODOS and then RODOS rate research, which may become a little bit more clearer to us based on what is currently being developed. I think maybe some of those levels needs to be little bit more refined to address the current state of the art in low level or low dose rate radiation exposures. Anyway, that's. And also, I think the numbers doesn't necessarily address the issues of variability in natural background. So some countries have very high background versus some countries have low backgrounds. How do we take into account the variability in natural background if we apply this to global community? Anyway, that's my comment.
Well, I have to say, let me, I know Perry, you're next. But I would just say one thing I think was important is the simplicity. And I think if we complicate this with too much information, then it no longer becomes what we really need to do as a communication tool. So personally, I thought that the idea of having this into the 5 categories was a good idea. But at the end of the day, if we try to do things like variability, like the background variability, I think we're losing the objective here, which is to try to find some measure which the public can grasp. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, it has to convey the appropriate amount of risk. So that's my view. All right. So sorry, go ahead, Per. You're next.
Okay.
I just want to,
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Dr. Kim, go ahead, please.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, I just woke up about 30 minutes ago to join this meeting. I'm on the West Coast, so it's about 6:30 now. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for inviting me. And I just want to make a few just comments. First, Mr. Dickman's comment is very relevant to our study because we didn't want to complicate anything anymore than it already exists with the scientific units. And then we wanted to make our purpose was to put the public at ease when they see certain numbers that are not too much detailed. And that's the reason why we chose the way we chose this RAIN. Regarding the comment about the name RAIN, Dr. What is it? Fenstermacher, right? Yeah. I think his name is concoction is red risk, and that may give a very scary feeling to the public because it says risk. RAIN, we already answered to that concern raised by the speaker already in the, I think it was in the May issue of Nuclear News. If you look at it, somebody from Germany raised a similar concern, and we answered it in that response to that reader. So that's that. The last one was from Professor Yim. By the way, Professor Yim, good to see you and good to talk to you now. It's been a while since I talked to you. We didn't have any thing in our mind to be concerned about the regulatory issues. That's something else. And then we don't want to put this one for the regulatory purpose or whatever. It'll be probably preposterous to put this thing as a measure of regulatory policy, because scientific units should be indeed play that role. So that's my comment, and thank you very much for giving me this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Per.
I just wanted to note that I think that it's very valuable to have this discussion, and also to note that there's different ways that you could construct this type of scale. I think that there's real value in standardizing, because if going forward, you could see this being something that would be much easier to explain, just like Richter scale when people talk about earthquakes. And there's a whole set of things about the Richter scale that also are more complex in terms of what an earthquake will actually do, but it's still a very valuable way to categorize different levels of ground motion. And what I would ask is there a path forward to create a consensus for some, actually maybe the national, I don't know which, but is a part of an upcoming study to say, let's look at all of these different ones and recommend a standardized approach for everybody to use, so that then going forward, one can point to that consistently as a part of just the general education about radiation risk, similar to what we do with seismic when we teach. But I do believe it would help enormously to standardize on a scale, and none of them will be perfect, but having everybody use the same scale will work a lot better. We know that for other units. such as English versus metric.
Okay, Don, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And this effort is really valuable. I think we've all struggled to figure out how to connect with the patients that we deal with and the providers as well. A couple points. One is with the RAIN scale, I'm concerned a little bit about and maybe I missed something, how the colors might differ for a 1-year-old versus somebody who's 50 years old, because you are assigning a relative degree, spectral degree of risk with that color. The second is, how does that color scale change with cumulative doses too? Because that needs to be built into the system. So those are two questions. And the final comment is, I guess I would ask all of us when we develop these to talk to the providers that deal with patients and find out what is helpful to them in their conversations with patients, because everything we have provided has not worked very well. And to find out how important it is for them to have these discussions, what kinds of questions the patient ask, and how best is it to frame this in the complexity of those care situations. Because oftentimes in an emergency setting, someone wants a CT, the risk is a nominal part of that conversations. It's when is it going to be done? What is it going to show? When's the report going to be available? What do we do if? All of those things flavor this risk conversation. So the provider voice in this of how best to incorporate that into conversations is really important. And one just sort of anecdote in our conversations with patients about the risk thing, one woman said, "Are you kidding? I don't care about the risk. What I care about is whether insurance is going to pay for the scan, because I don't want to do an out of pocket." And that's, we sort of laugh at it, but that's the reality of what kinds of things, come into care. So I guess the ask there in that comment is that we look at and ask the providers, is this helpful to you in terms of how you deal with the patients and the covenant you have between the patients and the ones that care for them and yourselves?
So Ellie, go ahead. Thank you.
I find this very compelling, certainly based on my experience at DOE, not being a scientist and having to explain to people I was working with, explaining something, a tool like this would make a big difference. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to make a general comment, which I think follows from what Don was saying, was that it seems to me a theme that's been running through some of our discussions is there's a middle piece we're missing now that's become more compelling in the world we're operating in, which is mediating between the profound and detailed science with people who need information. And it used to be, I think there were a lot of sources for that, but these sources are being systematically decimated. I mean, government websites are being taken down. So I think it's something, this is a great project, I think, to look at. And I think we might think about other ways in which we can serve a role as accurately translating scientific issues of some concern to an audience which is hungry for this and being fed a lot of idiocy, let's be frank, in the world we're in. So
Go ahead, Jim.
Microphone, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was going to say some of the things that have just been said, but there is another benefit. And that is, if you look around the room, such a system would help everybody, whether you're in the medical field, whether you're in nuclear cleanup, whether you're in nuclear energy. It would be one easy to understand system that would help everyone. I don't know if all of you have what those of us from the Raleigh, North Carolina area have, but when there are storms coming, they have risk levels. You've seen it on TV, a level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The public never sees the numbers or the algorithms that generate those colors. But what we know is, oh, thank goodness, we're only in a level 1, because level 4, look what it did to the west in Tennessee. So a system like this could be scaled for use where the public, your patients would see not necessarily the color, but the summary definition or the summary name, whereas those who work behind the scenes would know how you got there, just like the meteorologists do. So I think it would have great promise. And I agree with you, Ellie, that it is something that would benefit many of us and would be very applicable.
Policymakers.
Yeah.
So Monica,
You're
go
right.
ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate bringing this topic to the Academy, and I really truly enjoy both presentations. The subject is really needed, not just by the community, but the layman in the community, but also by the scientists. And I echo the same conversations. We have a broad range of applications for nuclear, all the way from small quantities in environmental remediation, all the way to large dose when there is a response to an accident. And so having a common scale, I totally agree, will be very beneficial. I do echo Paul's comments. It's never going to be perfect, but I would really like to see a committee or a study to bring many experts. Don mentioned that, people from different communities, different fields. What is it important to them? What do they need to communicate? Make some focus groups and so on, and really continue this, but with the ultimate goal to having one universal index that can easily tell people what is it. We can have debates on names and exactly what goes into there and risks, but it is needed, and this tool I will be fully supportive of having a tool like that. In fact, throughout my career, the hardest thing to communicate to the public and even to other researchers is, what is the dose? What does that mean? What does that mean to me as a person? And then the fear comes from, oh, I'm going to get nuke, right? And we know it's not the case. So I really appreciate the Academy bringing this subject.
Okay, well, we're running out of time, but I do want to make two points. One of which is I think one of the good comments we received in chat was that what we're really discussing are almost two different indices. One of which is really more towards accident, which I think RAIN really reflects, and which I think is important to have a very simple communication tool. And then there's one which is really has more of a risk scale, which is perhaps so. I don't know how we meld the two, or maybe we develop both, but nonetheless, I think ultimately we do have to find those tools. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Dr. Cho one quick question on your where are you going next? Where are you advancing your idea and concepts and socializing this? Have you taken this to, like, for example, the ICRP and the health physics community yet?
You asking to me?
Yes, sir.
We have discussed with some Korean societies. I mean, we presented only, but I have actually no idea what we have to do. But maybe we'll make some small project to get more widely accessible some modification. That's what I think. But rather than answering your question, I want to mention two things. One is that I think we need some global consensus from experts, because this kind of concept must satisfy the experts first, and then we can publish. We can publicize to the public. And for second point is for the simplicity. What if we set the RAIN value or whatever value to match almost exactly how people feel when they hear about the magnitude of an earthquake? So like a 3.8 magnitude of earthquake or 6.8. So we simply will adopt the same number, magnitude number to the radiological event. Then we can we can easily explain to people. It's the equivalent to the earthquake 4.5, something like that. I don't know. I'm just a mom, talking. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to this honorable meeting.
I think I know we're running out of time, so I better turn it over to my chair. 30 seconds left. I want to say thank you all. I think this is a great dialogue. I think we need to continue this discussion, and this is an opportunity for us to think about this for the Academy in the future. So thank you again, my Korean colleagues, and appreciate your staying up late or getting up early, Dr. Kim. So, all right, thank you. Will.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, panelists. We will now adjourn the open session. After a brief break, we'll take 5 minutes. The board and staff will reconvene for the closed session on a different link. So I appreciate everyone's attendance here and participation in the discussion.
Thank you.